What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Multiverse Monologues, the podcast show where we like to travel across the multiverses and fandoms that we love to talk about the movies and television shows that accompany those universes. And today, we are going back to the MCU in the Marvel movie marathon to talk about one of the most beloved Marvel films that have come out in recent time, Guardians of the Galaxy. But I am not the only one who's going to be talking about this movie because, as you guys know, in this Marvel movie marathon, we have covered so many Marvel films. Me, Ben Rayside, co-host, alongside Mr. Ethan Westloff. Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm super pumped to talk about this movie. But, you know, whenever people talk about this movie, they always highlight the characters. But when I look at this movie and I see the characters, all I can think is, what a bunch of a-holes. Am I right? Come on.
What a bunch of a-holes. Well, I know a big a-hole right now, and I'm just kidding. It's Mr. Micah Head. Micah,
Wow.
how are you doing?
You know, if I had a nickel for every time Vin Diesel played a linguistically challenged character that's also tall, that saves the world by blowing up at the end of the movie, I'd have 2 nickels. And it's just weird that it's happened twice.
It's not a lot of nickels.
You can count his character Dom Toretto in there too.
Okay, yeah, big guy. Does he?
He
Don't spoil it.
definitely has some linguistic problems in those movies.
It's all about family, all right?
That's right. In both of these franchises.
Much like this movie, yeah.
It's all about family, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy because, gentlemen, it's so nice to be back in the MCU. We had a great discussion on X-Men Days of Future Past last week. Go check that podcast out. I think it was one of our best films so far.
So good.
But I think I'm not gonna put it out there to start off, but I think we got a really good one because this is a beloved movie, and I think we all are fans of this. So seeing where this one ranks is going to be very interesting, so stick around and stay tuned for that. But before you do, I ask that you leave a like on this video. We're getting to be a little bit more prominent on YouTube with these videos now. Ethan, you're doing a fabulous job, especially with the last edit of X-Men Days of Future Past. The viewership is a little bit more up, and so you guys have been watching, and we certainly have a lot of fun making these videos for you and putting our faces up on YouTube, and so we certainly enjoy that. So leave a like. It would mean a lot to us. But gentlemen, without further ado, let's open our sling rings and head over to the MCU.
You're lucky the broad showed up, because otherwise me and Groot would be collecting that bounty right now, and you'd be getting drawn and quartered by Yondu and those Ravagers.
I've had a lot of folks try to kill me over the years. I ain't about to be brought down by a tree and a talking raccoon. Old?
What's a raccoon?
What's a raccoon? It's what you are, stupid.
Ain't no thing like me except me.
Peter Quill, a half-human orphan, steals a mysterious orb coveted by Ronan the Accuser, a Kree warlord who plans to use it to destroy Xandar and the galaxy. Quill is pursued by Ronan's forces, and he is forced to team up with a group of misfits: Rocket Raccoon, Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, and Groot to protect the orb and save the galaxy. That is your plot synopsis for Guardians of the Galaxy. Very simple, and it's definitely based off of, you know, those older space movies like Star Wars, but you also have your Indiana Jones injected into there with a killer soundtrack. And I don't know, we're gonna go take a little, you know, like capsule back in time because we're getting to that point where I remember seeing these movies in theaters. So I'm gonna shoot this to you, Mr. Wentslav. What do you remember about when this movie came out in 2014?
Well, this is a movie I didn't see in theaters. Unfortunately,
Really?
I missed the train for that. I loved the MCU, but I didn't have a car. I was under 16.
fair.
I couldn't drive yet. So there was no one that took me to see this movie. My brother took his girlfriend at the time to see this movie. So I didn't get to see it with him. He would be my main ride to the theater. So I got to see this later when it came out on physical copy. But what I remember from at the time was it was just a very, like, no one knew what to expect going into this movie. No one knew. We all thought, yeah, maybe it can be something. We don't know. That I was a big Parks and Rec fan, so I knew who Chris Pratt was as the iconic Andy Dwyer. So it was interesting to see him bulk up and take on this role of Star-Lord. But no, I didn't have a lot at the time. But when I got to see it at home, I just remember it was fun. That's my biggest problem with when people see this movie. I ask them, "Oh, have you seen Guardians? Do you like Guardians?" They look at me and they go, "Oh yeah, that one. That one's funny." Yes, this movie is funny, but it's so much more than just funny, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys.
And you, how many times do you think you've seen this movie over
Well,
the past?
this month I've seen it twice alone. So
nice.
I don't. This one probably not as many times as I wish I have, but it's at least in the 7 or 8 range right now.
But you would say you're a fan.
I would say
You're
I'm
a big fan of this movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was watching some scenes earlier, and we watched the ending together today. It's a movie that right when you finish it, you feel invited to go rewatch it again. So the same with this series. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Mike, are you as hot on this movie as Ethan is?
Well, any movie where I get royalties for them putting the main character's face on my body. Oh, I mean, I gotta say, this movie's great.
This is the 3rd movie they've done that. How many movies have they done that?
Fourth. I mean, Hugh Jackman. They got
which character?
Chris Pratt.
I do
Or
believe
Drax,
right.
you know?
Okay, yeah, they did
could
use
make a
Drax
case for
as
both,
well.
you
Yeah.
Mark Ruffalo's hulked out version is actually Micah's abs
That's
just
right.
blown up.
And Ang Lee.
Ang Lee's Hulk
Can't
too.
forget that
Okay,
one.
perfect.
But this movie, I remember more the trailers than the actual movie in theaters. I probably didn't see this movie in theaters, but I sure as heck remember watching the trailer in theaters many times. And if I recall, this movie was advertised almost as far away from a Marvel movie as possible. So many people that I know that got into Marvel was because of this movie. It was such a perfect on-ramp because you didn't have to know anything going into this movie. It teaches you everything, and that's also a point I want to talk about while we discuss this movie, is that it is an exposition dump throughout this movie. I remember the iconic raising up the middle finger trailer. It's so iconic. You got which song did they play in the trailer? Was it
That's Hooked on a Feeling.
Hooked on a Feeling? Yeah. The sales for Hooked on a Feeling went up some like 400,000 billion% after that trailer came out.
I didn't see this movie in theaters, but I did see that trailer in theaters because it played before The Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
So I do remember that was my first introduction to this movie and this world. But yeah, that middle finger thing. The movie felt a little more edgy than what Marvel was used to.
It's such a new step, a huge leap, a small step for man and a giant leap for Marvel MCU, because it takes it in such a different direction. This movie is definitely the most adult we've seen. It's closest to Deadpool that we've had. Deadpool's, I'd say, the extreme adult content that we get in the MCU, and something like, I don't know, Big Hero 6 that we'll watch next week is the kid one. And this is a step closer to allowing, that more crude, that more adult-centered humor towards it. And another huge impact that this had was nostalgia culture. From this movie, we got Stranger Things. From this movie, we got the resurgence of vinyl and cassette decks and mullets, and
because here's your market for capitalizing on that 70s 80s nostalgia, that music, that vibe. It's all prevalent in this movie.
What came out before this? Super 8? Like
Tron was big.
Tron was
a big one in that 80s nostalgia. I want to comment on one thing. You guys were talking about the trailers, and one thing that specifically I remembered, my 13-year-old brain remembered when I saw this trailer in theaters. There's a shot that is not used in this movie, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Gamora is shirtless in the shower scene, and I remember because I was like, oh man, if my parents see this trailer, they are not gonna let me see this movie.
Is this
Gamora was shirtless?
Is this the clip you were trying to find in the DVD extras? You were like, no, it's not that one. It's not that one.
I was like,
next one.
Is Gamora gonna be shirtless in this movie? Like, what kind of Marvel movie is this?
You're like, well, I gotta get tickets today.
But you're right in saying that this is not your typical, because you've had your trailers, exploit Black Widow, her form, but never like you had a bareback. But they didn't end up using it in the movie. But I remember that from the trailers of that time, and it was just something like I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't use that in the movie.
Never before would I have thought to hear the interior of a ship described as a Jackson Pollock painting.
Whoa.
All right, yeah,
that
a
would-
little.
But those are your kind of adult references that this movie. Tony Stark kind of has those as you go along, but they're kind of easy to miss. And I didn't understand this one until a couple years
kids
later.
wouldn't understand these jokes.
Right.
Like, okay, yeah, you can put two and two together if you look it up, but in the theater, in the moment, no kid's gonna know about that stuff. No kid's gonna see some sort of like pelvic thrust and think, okay, yeah, that's a sex thing.
No, it's
they
a
don't know what it
dance
is.
off, bro.
I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I was 12 when this movie came out, and I had no idea. Watching it last week, I watched it last Tuesday for the first time in a couple years. I think I watched it after Infinity War the last time. So after Infinity War, my dad was like, "Who are those guys?
Who are those cool guys in that movie?
You don't know who the Guardians of the Galaxy are?" So we watched 1 and 2, and he was like, "That was great. I'm watching 2 again."
So here's the question. Why do you think this was, as we're still looking back, why do you think this was so prevalent? Because this was everywhere at the time. When this movie came out, I didn't see it opening weekend, but everyone was like, "Oh, dude, you like Marvel movies? You got to go see this new one." Why was it so insanely, like, why did it take the culture by storm?
I think because Avengers is a certain crowd, right? Guardians is a different crowd, but Marvel, that overlap is pretty big. So you get to see, everyone wants to see this movie. It appeals to, in some ways, I think it appeals to even more people than the Avengers did. Even though Avengers was such a huge movie. I mean, if you look at the box office numbers, look at how many people saw this movie. We got $770 million in the box office. Guardians 2 made $869 million in the box office. And the budgets were 170 and 200 respectively for Guardians 1 and 2. It's just huge. This movie made so much money. It is the second largest quantity rated movie on IMDb, just next to Marvel movie next to the Avengers.
Right.
Sure, there's a lot of DC movies up there. All the Dark Knight movies are
Yeah.
up there, but Avengers, then Guardians 1. Why is that?
I believe it was.
I believe it's because of the post-credit scene. Our first look at Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck.
We have
Since
to
the
highlight
80s.
the first time Howard the Duck has reappeared in our Marvel movie marathon.
He's canon.
Since the very first one. Guys, if you're listening to this, go start our journey from the beginning. We started with Howard the Duck. We're here now.
He's back.
That was a long time ago.
I wanted to highlight why you think
Yeah.
this movie was so big. First of all, the marketing was huge. Hooked on a Feeling, after this trailer released, was #1 on the Billboard for a couple weeks. And I think we haven't mentioned his name yet. James Gunn.
Ooh.
James Gunn, and the hand he had on not only the creation of this world. Marvel was already a prevalent world, but he got to create his own world here. There's a great special feature on Disney Plus and on your Blu-rays if you got them, called James Gunn's Guide to the Galaxy. I'd recommend watching through that. But I watched an interview today with Chris Pratt, Kevin Feige, and James Gunn, done by John Campea, from back in the day, 9 years ago, and the importance they felt this movie had. Kevin Feige specifically, the way he talked about casting the Guardians and casting the vision for it, he said it was the same feeling he felt when he was doing Iron Man.
Wow.
We're gonna take, because it's crazy to think about Iron Man as not a huge character, because now we look at him, he's huge. But Kevin Feige said we took a character that the comic readers would know, and we brought him right to the front and made him this core piece. And he said, that's what we're going to do with the Guardians. We're going to take these comic characters that really only hardcore comic fans know about. We're going to bring them to the forefront and really put an importance on there. And they really highlighted that with the casting of Chris Pratt, which there's a great story. James Gunn didn't want Chris Pratt in this movie. He heard like that chubby guy from Parks and Rec. I don't want to have him read for the role. He read for the role. Within 20 seconds, James Gunn said, yeah, this is our guy. This is Star-Lord.
Then he took 6 months, got just completely jacked.
Right.
Chris jacked.
Literally.
Oh, man.
You take a look at
His goal was 50 pounds. He lost 60. Muscle, man. Whew.
I mean, look at him. He's got a
You
shirtless
seen
scene.
Moneyball?
He's got a shirtless scene, man, in this movie, and he's certainly very
I got
cut.
a shirtless scene.
Of course, I guess. Yeah, my bad, Micah. Micah's got a shirtless scene. He certainly gets a little bit more obese over the. I think Rocket comments that on which movie is that?
Infinity War.
Infinity War, right? You're one sandwich away from fat, Quill.
It adds to it though. It adds to his character arc because then he's back to kind of more fit in the third movie. And to go along with Ethan's point with these characters were not well known. If you guys didn't know, Rocket was only in 10 comics before the Guardians movies.
Wow.
10 issues total. Not volumes, 10 issues.
Where'd you read that? Yeah.
Trivia.
Okay.
Like that
Guardians 3.
When you say that, and you might be right because I haven't looked into it, I feel like you're dead
know.
wrong on that.
Yeah.
Like this is Rocket Raccoon. Like
I heard 10
I feel like
issues.
he's been in the comics since like the 80s.
But while you're looking that up,
Well, he was in the 60s comics, but I heard he was only in 10 issues.
right,
I don't
but
know.
that's
no,
a
he was.
super
There's
small
a
number.
2008 run that he was really big in. I don't know where you read that.
Oh, sorry. 4 issues. Nah, I don't know. Anymore. I take it back then.
No, you're fine. There you go.
Point is,
you
he
get facts
wasn't in
here.
a lot of comics, and I think that goes for all of these characters. They weren't big like the Eternals, except the Eternals didn't have the effect that Guardians
Right,
did.
right. But something that James Gunn was first offered, so something we really talked about with our Winter Soldier podcast was how Kevin Feige went out, sought out the Russo brothers and wanted them to pitch the idea. And they were really like not big. Same with James Gunn. He did Slither, Super. He had a few projects in the can that were liked by a good amount of people. But this one, same deal, right? What he's huge for now is these Guardians films and his work in DC. What he's gone on to do from there. But Kevin Feige's like, yeah, let's get you in this. And when he first heard the pitch, he's like, no, I can't do that. That's too hard. And he used the quote like, Bugs Bunny in the Avengers, right? That's how he saw Rocket, as just Bugs Bunny. But then he went home, he said on his drive home, he thought long and hard about it. And he decided, I'm going to craft this character of Rocket, and it's going to be, the character we ultimately see in this movie, and we'll see in the second movie, and even deeper in the third movie when we get there. But he turned these characters into something, he wasn't a fan of them, really. Then he read up on them, he got to write them, and now he say that like they're his family. He loves these characters. And I think that's what's at the heart of this film is that James Gunn loves these characters.
How old is James Gunn? How old is that guy?
Get up, Micah.
I want to know what age that guy is because what I
56.
see 56. So what I see here is someone who can take characters, craft them into the way he wants them, and just absolutely take those characters and make them huge, make them stars. And so while I'm not the biggest fan of him taking over DC, knowing that they're going to be in like the care of this guy who goes home and thinks about a character who's not in many issues of comics, like that gives me so much confidence, and it's all on display in this movie. You want to talk about a reason why this movie was so successful, other than the reasons that you guys mentioned. You've got 5 misfit characters, a couple more if you want to include a couple other characters.
2 fully CGI.
And all of them are great.
Yeah.
All of them are great, man. You want to talk about Hawkeye? You can throw him to the side and put any one of these characters higher than him. And no disrespect to Hawkeye because he's great.
Full disrespect.
It's just
Trash.
these 5 are so core into this movie that it just creates an unforgettable experience in the theater. Mix that with the soundtrack, and you've got, like, I mean, everyone saw it with Stranger Things, but this happened before that. You got your Running Up That Hill. That was last week, that was last year, that took the world by storm. This is what, Hooked on a Feeling was back in 2014. Everyone was playing the song. They played
volume.
the vinyl. They had the vinyl everywhere. It was the only like vinyl I ever saw people buying at that time. And I was like, since when do people buy vinyl? Dude, yeah, it's the awesome mix from Guardians. I'm like, what? This movie is huge. Marvel. And I said this before the podcast started. If Avengers put them on the map, this movie made Marvel as big as possible. Like, they could not be stopped. And you look at every movie after this, Age of Ultron, which was big, not as well liked, but huge, still made a ton of money. Ant-Man, very well loved. You go from Civil War, Doctor Strange. They go on such a tear for the rest of this, like for a couple of years, that it's actually insane. And it all starts with this movie. Another thing that starts with this movie, humor. big point because humor has never been like this in the MCU before. And I think they took and saw this movie and the humor that was injected here. And I think they injected it into a lot. Almost every one of their
we already
projects.
had quips. Tony had quips.
Right.
We had quips in Winter Soldier. That quips were a part of it. But yeah, Kevin Feige, the key scene in this movie that he said changed his view on the future was the scene at the closer to the end when they're arguing. You know, I have 12% of a plan.
What percentage?
I don't know. 12%.
12%?
That's a fake laugh.
It's real!
Totally fake.
That is the most real, authentic, hysterical laugh of my entire life because that is not a plan.
That scene, he said he looked at that scene and he said, that's what I want the MCU to be like more. So, yeah, you're right. This movie did change the landscape. But to me, this is something I wanted to talk about was because I said it up front when I asked people, do you like the Guardians movie? They go, yeah, that one's fun. That one's funny. And to me, yeah, it is. It's a very funny movie. But it's funny because the characters say funny things. They're not jokes to me. They're just characters saying things. A lot of them are jokes. They play as jokes. But the way the characters are so well defined and so well written that like the thesaurus, right? With Drax, that joke is great. But that's just Drax fully being his character. It's not like, oh, we have a funny joke. Which character we want to say it? No, the jokes are written for the characters, and that's why I think it is so good, right? These characters are just funny. They're not characters saying jokes. They're just funny characters.
Yeah, and there's no clear, like, you'll see this in later Marvel movies, especially in things like Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, where it's very clear they just set up a camera and say, go. And then they just have them do a little bit of an improv scene. There's even one in Guardians 3. You can tell it's kind of off the cuff, the one where they're getting the data for Rocket and he looks over at Nebula and they go through that scene. You don't have any of that in the first Guardians movie. It wasn't very common to see that sort of improv thing. And that's what I love about this movie. It's written, it's thought out. It's not just like, all right, it happened to be funny. Now we're good. We're sending it. It's great. I love the humor in this movie. I love how diverse the different characters are. They each have their own thing, and none of them are Flanderized. There's no Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. That became a word to describe characters who just become a very vague definition of themselves after multiple seasons, after a long time. Guardians characters, I think, are the only. No, I might be wrong, but they're a very good example. Okay, we'll say a very good example of characters who throughout 4-5 movies don't become Flanderized.
I agree. In every one of their performances, and I think that's because James Gunn really presides over almost everything. Even in Infinity War and Endgame, the Russo brothers went to him and said, "Hey, are you okay with us doing this?"
He also
with this
produced
character?
on those movies too.
Yes, he did. He did. So there was a lot of input that he had over these characters because he's taking them on this journey. There's Infinity War and Endgame are just the middle point in between Guardians 2 and 3. So they can't mess up his plan and his future. And I think that's what you need. And I think the MCU needs that with its characters because right now it has talented people working on it, but talented people aren't really the best or should be the best fit for these movies. Rian Johnson is extremely talented. Can he make a good Star Wars movie? That is up for a lot of debate. That is up for a lot of debate. But that's the thing. Talent doesn't equal you're going to make a good movie. You have to have a passion for the characters, for the story. James Gunn has that. When you take Scott Derrickson and you make Doctor Strange, and then you totally throw him out because his story doesn't fit with your universe and bring in Sam Raimi, who's also great, the story gets kind of jumbled.
That's
and it's
another
like,
thing,
okay,
too.
what happened here?
Doctor Strange is a similar situation. Outside of the comics, people didn't really know Doctor Strange, just like with the Guardians. But once you introduce it into the movies, Doctor Strange is one of the lowest rated Marvel movies for some reason. It's in the bottom half.
Yeah, which is
It's weird.
which is very well. A lot of people drew like a lot of similarities between him and Tony Stark.
Okay.
Oh, it's Tony Stark, but with magic, and so that kind of it was good. I mean, it certainly made its money.
See, what they need is a wrestler who had never been in a movie before, or at least a big movie, to headline a brand new franchise, maybe in the Sony universe. Maybe
El Muerto. Okay.
Oh boy.
No, but yeah, I love what you're saying right now.
Batista does a
The
great
point
job.
you're making is that the writing has to be there, the character
Yes.
work has to be there, which is a note that I don't know how Marvel strayed so far from this, but like just because you bring a cool character from the
I know
comics
how.
in doesn't mean that's good. Like, okay, you're bringing in Miss Marvel, people love Miss Marvel, but you have to make sure the writing's there. And you have to make sure that you actually do stuff with the character. And I think the core example of that is James Gunn. These characters weren't really well known, and people were like, "Oh, you're bringing those to the screen, whatever." But it's his love for those characters that really translates, and now they're one of the most beloved part of the MCU.
Yeah, either you get one of the highest rated sequels of all time with Volume 3, or you get the most disliked YouTube video of all Marvel trailer history.
Well, just look at it. You have give me the director for Spider-Man Home Trilogy. What's his name?
James Watts.
John Watt.
John Watts. That's a
Some Mark
great
Webb.
trilogy. You can argue that if you don't like Far From Home, I know that's controversial in some areas, but all three of those movies, in my opinion, and I think in your opinion too, quality films. Same guy directed all three. All right. Captain America, we got kind of lucky because the Russo brothers are just geniuses. And you could say, well, the Avengers, man, all four of those movies are pretty good. But those movies are more event films.
Right.
You don't have to, in a way, focus so much on the characters and the writing as much as you have to tell a grand epic. When it comes to the focused personal story, I think you have to have someone there who wants to tell the story, who wants to write for the story. And I mean, we could talk about writers all day and the strike that's going on, but without taking too much away from this conversation, I'd rather not go down that direction. We're going to cover that at a later time.
I do have something to say about the writers, though. So, this is our third time a woman has helped write this movie.
What was her name? What was her name? It
Nicole
was-
Perlman.
Yes. Yes.
So, our first time,
Is it Warzone?
no,
Not Warzone.
Howard the Duck with Gloria Katz.
Oh, okay.
Then the second time was
Wait a
Punisher
minute.
Warzone.
Wait a minute. Hold
Yeah,
on.
and then Howard the Duck is in this movie. Full circle, baby. This is one of what, 5 movies
A pure
total that
coincidence.
we get? No coincidences in those.
I'm sure. I don't know the relation. Do you guys know the relationship between James Gunn and Nicole Perlman?
No.
Their relationship. I'm not sure. Either way, turned out to be absolutely fantastic and a great film. I don't think anyone is, disputing that. Do you have a favorite song, Ethan? Out of the greatness of this soundtrack,
I knew this question would come up. The
and I
best
wanna
needle
ask it.
drop of the
You
movie.
gotta, yeah.
Oh man, there are so many great ones. I know my least favorite one.
Least
for sure.
favorite?
Yeah, but it's still not even bad.
Oh, okay. It's
But-
more like just.
I mean, "Come and Get Your Love" is just so iconic.
That's mine too.
It's fantastic. And what's funny is James Gunn, Chris Pratt's like, "Can we get a choreographer in here for me to do this?" And James Gunn's like, "No, just dance." There was one shot of that where he wanted it to be choreographed, and it's that amazing shot of Chris Pratt under the A.
Dude, that's my favorite shot of the whole movie, right
So
there.
good.
Because then the boom.
I want to talk about
title.
shots later. There are a lot
Yeah.
of great shots in this movie too, but I think "Come and Get Your Love" is mine.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the tape right now, looking at our list here, and I'm reminded of my favorite, and that's "Escape," the Pina Colada song. I love this soundtrack, okay? Let me just say,
Of course.
Great.
it's called "Escape," and they're escaping. Wow. Mind blown.
But that song tells a great story, and in the middle of the movie, like the way the music correlates to the scene and how it
Yeah.
propels forward. That's why Guardians 2 is personally my favorite, because the music integrates, I think, perfectly into the
Well,
narrative of the
you
movie.
see it with each movie, the progression of James Gunn being able to do more James Gunn stuff. This
Yeah.
first one, sure, these songs are written into the movie, but that's like screenwriting 101. You don't write songs into your script because you're not sure if you can secure the rights to those songs. But when Guardians 2 comes around, James Gunn is feeling a little more confident. I can get these songs. So he can
every single
he
song.
can address the song, like make it relate to the scene as hard as he wants it to. This one, the songs are probably a little more vague, but they're still really great.
Yeah, I love the shot. So it starts Pina Colada song. He's getting his Walkman from the guard, and then they're like, "Where's he at? Where's he at?" And then if you like Pina Colada, and he's playing out of the ship. That's so sick. Oh, loved it.
You're an imbecile.
So how is the music though? Because this is a thing that happens with music, and it when it becomes this big. Over time, people start to get tired of this song. Me personally, I really am tired of hearing "Hooked on a Feeling." "Hooked on a Feeling's a great song, but I've heard it a lot of times. So it starts to age. Has this soundtrack aged for you in a good way, bad way, or do you still like it as much as when you
Okay, first off,
Yeah.
I was a really cool kid in high school, and I carried around my Walkman with this tape. Both tapes, actually.
Did you really have a
Yeah.
Walkman? That's awesome.
I got those two right there. Those
That's
were my
awesome.
daily drivers. And I would bring them to school and look all cool and stuff. And I would listen to this stuff.
Would you look cool, really?
I look so cool. As a belt clip and everything,
I know
man.
you looked cool, but did other people think
Did
you
other
looked
people
cool?
think you were cool?
I
That's
didn't
that's
care.
the real
I had my
question.
headphones
There
on.
you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
These songs didn't get boring to me. There was maybe one or two that I would skip, like the David Bowie one at the end. Or not the David Bowie one, the Guardians Manifesto or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That one I would always skip. But the other ones, especially the Guardians 2 soundtrack,
Yeah.
they did not go stale for me. I would keep those on all the time. And I was like, no wonder why Peter never got tired of this stuff.
Right.
It's so good.
That's why they call it awesome mix.
It's the awesome mix.
Don't call it the lame mix. It's the
It
awesome mix.
definitely holds up a lot better. I think that's the weakest part of holding up the torch from Guardians 1 and 2 is that 3 kind of missed the ball on the mix just a little bit. There's some great songs in there.
In your opinion and in my opinion, but I know there's a lot of fans of
Yeah,
the Guardians
yeah.
3 soundtrack.
I
so
need to listen
no,
to it more.
No shade.
I need to get do they sell the
Well,
cassette?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. You don't need to listen to it more. Your first impression is what you get of it. So when
But
I
that-
first
that-
saw Guardians 2,
I want to make his point though. Is
Yeah.
you say how is these songs aged? My thing is the first 2 movies I can sing all those songs, but that's because of how many times I've listened to them. And yeah, I think once the Guardians 3 soundtrack is accumulating more, I can sing it a little more. But I think there's also some thematic elements to the third one because the first 2 movies, those are mixtapes his mom made him. The third movie's songs on a Zune, a random Zune, right? So it's going to be more random. It's not going to be as personal. And I think it works in
so
that
you're
way.
saying there's an in-universe reason
Yeah,
to
and
why
definitely.
it's not as catchy because this isn't pop songs from when he was a kid. Okay,
Yeah,
all
and
right,
I
like
also
that.
think that they play more of the song in these first 2 movies. The third one, I noticed they don't play enough of the song to get me to say like, oh yeah, that was
Some of
good.
it's like they play the song and
Just
they're
for
like,
the cool
just so
part.
they can throw it on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is in that movie, which is all right.
like the part where Adam Warlock is flying in. They play the cool guitar part, but they don't play the rest of the song really. It would be cool if they kept playing the song further into the scene and it accompanies the action. That's what they do in this movie. That's what they do in the second movie. And that's what I love about those two.
You know what else they do in this movie? Thanos. Big time.
Politics bore
You want to talk about, and I'm going to shoot this over to Ethan first, because
Yes.
I know he wants to talk about this, but MCU connections and how important this movie is, big time.
Yeah, this is, I think, the most important movie for what Infinity War and Endgame become. This is the movie. The setup, the execution. You know, you introduce the idea of the Infinity Stones, which James Gunn said he wrote that scene in 6 minutes. Or
cow.
not 6 minutes, in 30 minutes. But that Kevin Feige was like, oh, let's build our saga around this. That's cool. They went and ran with that. So cool. But you get the introduction like, oh, this is part of a bigger universe. And these Guardians, really the first time we're up and personal with a stone. We know about stones, but the Tesseract is a cube. and the Mind Stone is on a Loki scepter. They're not actually like physical stones. This is the first time we really see the stone that will eventually go in Thanos' gauntlet. And yeah, of course, Thanos. We get the introduction to the big bad. I mean, we got him in End of Endgame.
But this is the first time
Or
you
End
see
of
him.
Avengers.
This is the first
Yeah.
Josh Brolin, right?
Yep.
Because he wasn't.
Yep.
That was just all CG. The first one. Now it's actually him mocapping it.
Your
Voicing,
politics
yeah.
bore me. Good meme right there. But
Right.
No,
also
this
a
is
huge scene.
huge movie. Like Kevin Feige putting importance on this. This is the new Iron Man, and I think for what it did and what it spun into motion, yeah, and the way it's changed the landscape, and still to this day, people love the Guardians.
The MCU really goes cosmic after this. James Gunn even describes this as Marvel cosmic universe now.
Which original plans were for him to oversee the cosmic side of the universe, and we're not gonna talk about it a ton,
Right.
but he did
Right.
get fired.
Right.
Womp womp.
Which is
Yeah.
very unfortunate. Which is, yeah.
But he got to come back for 3.
He did.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that was because he really cared about the characters more than anything else. I don't think he would have come back if this was like a Peyton Reed Ant-Man type deal.
Right.
You
He
know?
said the draw to come for the third one was finish Rocket's story. But we're straying pretty far
Oh,
from this
right.
movie as a
And
core.
yeah, let me reiterate. Rocket was only in 10 comics in his first 30 years of being a character.
That's what it was. Okay.
His first 30 years, that's what it was. And then
crazy.
he was in a couple comics in the 2006, 2008, and then nothing until after Guardians 1 came out. Then he got his own run.
Okay.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia.
Which, you know,
Yeah.
I
Can
only
you
trust
trust it?
Wikipedia, so you better
Nice.
go check your facts.
so when you talk characters in this movie,
Mm.
you have a great band of heroes and adventures. And I think we should maybe save that conversation for favorite characters.
Yes.
But how do you feel about the villain of this movie in Ronan the Accuser? Ethan.
Who? Oh yeah, this movie has a villain. You're right. There is a villain in this movie. There's a reason we're
Yeah,
like
he's
30.
he's in The Hobbit.
The reason we're 30 minutes into this podcast and we're just now mentioning
Right.
Ronan because he's the weakest part of this movie easily.
Easily.
Where James Gunn puts so much love into the group of heroes, the superheroes, which James Gunn will say to this day, this is not a superhero movie. He doesn't want this to
And
be
I would agree.
a superhero movie. But yeah, Ronan, nothing.
Yeah.
I get nothing from this guy.
Ronan and Nebula really don't add much to me personally.
To me, Ronan is just that guy
Who's naked?
who's okay, but he's there.
He is
He's the MacGuffin, right? So that the characters do something in the movie. He pushes our characters to do some awesome,
Yeah.
compelling things.
True.
But him in and of itself, okay, get that Power Stone, destroy Xandar.
I draw a lot of parallels between this one and the Guardians 3 villain. What's his name?
High Evolutionary.
High Evolutionary. Yeah. Not the greatest of villains. Their motivations are kind of weak. I think High Evolutionary is definitely better, gives a better performance, but there's not a lot there for me to grab onto. There's just not. You got the whole Kree war, which is cool for lore wise because the Kree have been in the Marvel universe in the comics for a long time. So it was cool. I remember hearing that and I was like, Kree, when are we getting Skrulls? Turns out we wouldn't get that for another 5 years. But still really cool to hear that little tidbit dropped in there. But other than that,
Yeah,
not very interesting.
His motives just aren't that clear. Ronan's because he says he wants to cure it. He wants to cure the Kree. What does that mean?
Right.
And then he says, "Oh, I'm gonna blow up the planet." Oh, well, yeah, I guess. But why not just say blow up the planet?
So here's my question. Does it matter in a movie like this? Does it matter to have a villain that is not necessarily the most memorable if your characters are as good as we've said they are?
because it doesn't matter because James Gunn wants us to only remember the Guardians. He wants us to think, okay, these are the heroes who destroyed the who cares villain, and now we're on to the next one.
Where the villain becomes much more personal
Yes.
and, in my opinion, better.
Yes. When you look back on the MCU, you don't think of Ronan. You think of what's his name in the second one?
Ego?
Ego.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the actor's name.
You mean the MCU as a whole or as
The MCU as a whole. If you're looking at, okay, who's the Guardians villain? It's Ego. All right. Who's Iron Man's villain? Oh, it's the bald guy.
I do
And then the
think
guy with the
Obadiah's
electric
thing.
whips.
Ethan, does it matter to you?
No.
Do you want a great villain?
I think what a great villain would push this movie to the level where perfection is. But in a movie when the goal of it is to introduce us to these characters, and where I come out of this movie in love with each member, all 5 of the Guardians, where I just like feel like I have a deeper connection with them. I think that's a win. And if spending less time with Ronan meant I got to spend more time with the Guardians, I'm here for it. That's what it's about. All right. The MCU is critiqued for having weak villains the whole way through, right? And yeah, you do want a good villain for your antagonist to go up against, or your heroes to go up against. But when the heroes are so good and compelling, and where the real villain of this movie are the characters with each other, and when they come together, that's when the plot is resolved, right? That's it, the team forming. So the villain's just there, and I think that's where a lot of these movies fail. Is they're like, oh, throw a villain in there.
Yeah, it's very clear that this movie is designed to make you love the Guardians and know who they are by the end of this movie. They didn't want a single person leaving this theater saying, who's the big guy again? Who's the tree? What was his name?
Yep.
Or what was the guy with the red tattoos? What was that guy doing? Or what was the green guy? Or what was, every character is so unique, iconic, and let me say this, they introduce the characters twice. Each character is introduced twice. They introduce Peter. Peter's introduced probably 3 or 4 times. They introduce him as a boy. They introduce him as Star-Lord. Who? I'm Peter Quill. I'm just a guy who steals things, right?
A Joker man.
And then he's introduced on Xandar, is that what the planet's called?
Yep.
With Rocket scanning him. Then he's introduced in prison, and then he's introduced to another guy at some point too. To Gamora at the outside of. He's introduced so many times. Drax, Rocket, Gamora, Groot. I mean, Groot introduces himself every time he speaks. I mean, how clear can you get? This movie was designed so that you know who these characters are, and I think it's his biggest weakness too. On the rewatch. The dialogue gets a little stale, knowing, okay, I already know who these characters are. Do I really need to know who they are 7 times in one movie?
So that's my next question. The last question, big one that I have before we get into all this, and I'm gonna give you guys time to say what you guys want to say, but my humor is a big part of this movie. There's no doubt about it. There's almost Chris Stuckman on the way here. I was listening to him. I always listen to him before I come here. Got a little short drive. I listened to his review, and he said he would call this movie a full-blown comedy, almost to that point. So to that point, to his point, Chris Stuckman's a very well, he's done many movie reviews. I don't know if I would call this one a comedy, but humor is very prevalent in this movie, and almost 10 years later, how does the script, how do the jokes, do they still land? How do you guys still feel about it, Ethan?
I kind of went into it earlier, but I would disagree with Chris Stuckman. This is not a full-blown comedy. It's very funny. There are funny moments, but what is at the core of this is a character story. And we learn about all these characters, but the main core of this is Star-Lord's character, right? I love his character in this movie. The whole movie is him holding on to his feelings of being a boy and never letting go, right? He's still listening to the music. He's still very childish. But then it all resolves with him reaching out to Gamora, accepting the hand that his mom reached out and he didn't accept. He accepts a hand, and now he's able to move on, open the present, read the letter from his mom. It's a character story. That's what it is. And yeah, there are funny moments thrown in there, and there are a lot of laugh out loud moments. But to me, there's no part of this movie where I'm like, that's something that the character wouldn't say.
Yeah, the best part of this movie is not a joke, and that's what makes it not a comedy. This is an action movie first, then a comedy.
Okay.
I'd say
Character movie first.
When I think about character, action, comedy. When I think about this movie, I think of Peter's struggles. I think of Rocket's action. I think of Drax's jokes.
But So is there a point though, because you said this yourself, a lot of people come at this movie and remember, oh yeah, that's the funny
It's
one.
funny, yeah. I think that's why it's so appealing for a lot of people. James Gunn is just a funny guy.
Yeah.
You listen to him in any interview,
That's true.
He's really funny, really charismatic. I think if you sit down and he writes a script, it's going to be funny. But that's not what he wants people to leave it with. He wants funny moments, but he also wants the character moments there. And no, I don't think that there's a negative of people thinking that it's just funny.
Yeah.
Because that means that they enjoyed it. That means they went in there, they enjoyed it. But then for people who wanted a character story, they also get that too.
Yeah.
There's something for everyone.
And no disrespect to any of you who just think it's the funny movie, but maybe there is a more mature look on this movie to where, you know, if you're just a casual going into the Marvel universe and you're like, oh yeah, it's a good movie, but to someone like us nerds who go and sit down and review every single Marvel movie who ever exists, maybe you see a little bit more. So, and I think there's definitely that in this movie. I totally agree with you on that. Before we dive into characters, scenes, and score, anything else you guys want to say or add?
I
about
definitely
this
remember
one?
crying the first time watching
Really?
the We Are Groot. Way back. Oh yeah, it was unexpected. The whole movie, you never, because think about it. You're okay. Yeah, this guy can only say "We are Groot," and I mean I am Groot, and Rocket says that very clearly. He says his vocabulary consists of 3 words: "I am" and "Groot," in that order specifically.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, yeah, sure.
You
And then-
cried?
I remember crying.
I think every
I mean,
character
I was like 12.
every character gets a moment, I think. And it, whether big or small, but before we move on to you know how we normally do this, but what's your favorite shot of this movie? I know you had said
I'll take
the
the-
Star-Lord under the A.
Yep.
Great. Micah, did you
I'm
have
still singing the needle drop when he flies out.
Yep.
Oh
Great.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was sick.
there's so many interviews, so many special features you can go watch, but Chris Pratt is just, you can tell he's just amazed that he got to play the superhero because he never thought in a million years he would. And he just is so, because his mask is practical. That's a real mask that they made. He just, the excitement he had while wearing that, he just felt like, I'm a superhero
Well,
now.
Dave Bautista too. He was so pumped because he had never really been in a role before, and being in a Marvel role, something he would really wanted to do. He cried when he first got it. He was like, "Yeah!" And then he hired an acting coach just so he could nail this role.
Yeah.
and he
And-
nailed it.
Yeah, it was something that was cool was him, Dave Bautista and Zoe Saldana were talking about the makeup process and how,
Oh,
I don't know, man, 4 or 5 hours
saw a time
in a
lapse this
chair. It doesn't sound appealing. And Dave Bautista for makeup, he couldn't sit down, so he had to stand. They gave him sticks with tennis balls on him where he would lean on them. So he had to stand up for the whole makeup process for 4 hours. But he said, yeah, at first I was like, I can't do this every day. But then he said the final product, he'd look in the mirror and he'd go, that was worth every second of that makeup. Let's go film some scenes. So I just said, that's just so cool. The way, the dedication that he had to the role.
We've seen it before on the Marvel movie marathon. You have your Iron Man. Well, I'm talking
Right.
about dedication from the directors, the writers, the characters, the actors who bring it all together and to make something that's truly special. And I see that a lot in the beginning stages and beginning phases of the MCU. And that's where that's how great movies
Yeah.
are made. So with that,
Yeah, I still want to do my favorite shot. My favorite
Oh,
shot.
yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So you
My
did your
bad.
Star-Lord flying out.
Pardon me.
Pina Colada's playing. Yours is the A. I love this shot gets me every time, but it's Drax, you know, as Rocket's crying there over Groot's dead body. And you have Drax, he's sitting there, he's big, he's huge, he's buff. And then he reaches over and he pets Rocket. That shot, I love that shot. It's so good. And the way Rocket is so like cold to it at first.
yeah.
Another cool shot, just to give us a second shot in our favorite shots, is when Drax throws the rifle to Rocket when he's on top of Groot, and it spins in the air. He grabs it and he says, "Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's good stuff."
It's a good time to also highlight how those two characters are fully CGI and just the way they feel so real. They're so well realized.
They're
A
so high
raccoon and a tree.
definition too.
Yeah.
It
It
sucks you right in.
That's my favorite part about these movies is I'm just looking at Rocket man, you look like a real character to me.
And he only gets better and better from there. Guardians 3, it's insane.
I mean, and yeah, you think, all right, well, yeah, a lot of things are like that, but this is 2014, talking about full CGI character. I mean, you go back to Lord of the Rings, Gollum's great, don't get me wrong, but, you know, there are certain scenes
He shows
doesn't-
some cracks.
Right, but that's the technology of its time. To see this Rocket Raccoon that is digitally produced, but have so much life into that character, it's beautiful.
Shout out Bradley Cooper.
Yep.
He sells the voice acting so well.
And Sean
Oh,
Gunn.
Sean
Yep.
Gunn too. The physical performance.
Yes. All right, gentlemen, favorite characters. I'm going to shoot this to Micah first. Out of which of the 5, or it could go outside.
I'm going.
Who's your favorite?
I'm going Drax just because he's my dad's favorite character, and it always makes me laugh whenever my dad quotes movies, and Drax is pretty much the only character he quotes from this movie.
What's a quote you hear him say?
It won't even go with anything we're talking about, but he'll say, "Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast." Catch it.
Catch it. And then the way, the confidence.
He especially says the one from Infinity War, "I'm moving so incredibly slow that I become naked to the human eye." Or invisible to the human eye.
Very quote-worthy movie,
Oh,
especially
man.
a lot from Drax. That's a great pick. He's a great
Never
character.
call me a thesaurus.
Who is it, Ethan? Who's your favorite?
I'll go Star-Lord. I think this is he's the main character. I know James Gunn has said that they're all really main characters, and Rocket is like a secret protagonist of this movie. But I'm going with Star-Lord just from I think the way Chris Pratt. First of all, it's Chris Pratt, right? The guy is so charming. Watch him in any interview. He's just a funny guy too. And I love him as Andy Dwyer, so I already loved Chris Pratt as a character. Now he's just a different character, but yeah, his whole arc in this movie where he gets abducted by Yondu. And shout out Michael Rooker. We haven't mentioned his name yet through the podcast.
I'm about to.
Ooh, awesome. Okay, sweet. But he gets abducted as a kid, and then his mental state, he's stuck there. He can't advance through the whole movie. He hasn't opened up to anyone. He's been very closed off. Even the women that he is very flirtatious with, he doesn't really open up to them. They're just, scratches on his nightstand, as they say. So he's so closed off through the whole movie. And then it's at the end when he can accept Gamora's hand and accept that this is my new family. I can move forward. Where he sits down and he opens the letter, and Ain't No Mountain High Enough playing as he reads this letter. And we realize why this guy's so immature. And we see why a big thing throughout this movie is he wanted to be called Star-Lord the whole movie. What a dumb name. What a dumb thing to insist you be called. And it's because that's what his mom called him. That's why I love that name. So he's my favorite character.
I love the way they use music to convey what the characters are feeling on a different level.
Right.
And then you can listen later and be like, "Oh yeah, that's what that lyric is." You can apply that.
And just so we don't,
Especially with Guardians
yeah, and
2.
just so I don't tread myself again, that's my favorite scene when he reads the letter from his mom.
Peter, I know these last few months have been hard for you, but I'm going to a better place, and I will be okay, and I will always be with you. You are the light of my life, my precious son, my little Star-Lord. Love, Mom.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And the way the song plays, to keep me from getting to you, baby. The letter gets to Peter.
Great singing, Ben.
Dude,
Yeah, keep singing.
well, I don't think anyone would want to hear that. But yeah, I teased it. We haven't talked about him at all, but Yondu is fantastic. One of the reasons why Guardians 2 is my favorite movie, because he gets a lot more to do.
He does.
I
Yeah.
think
Poppins,
Michael
yo.
Rooker does such a fantastic job. When I picked you up on Terran, those boys wanted to eat you. They never tasted Terran before. Dude,
And
come on.
He's a testament to James Gunn's
Yes.
ability to work with characters to where this guy, same with Nebula later in the movies, but this guy, we see him, we're like, that guy just sucks. But then at the end of 2, you're crying over him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but go
Spoilers.
ahead.
And there's a great scene in this movie because he has the coolest weapon. His little whistle needle. That's the cool and one of the coolest scenes in the movie. It's probably not going to make our list, but I want to highlight that scene where he absolutely demolishes all those warriors and then takes down that ship. Such a cool character. His voice acting that he does, that just the Michael Rooker voice, it's not voice acting, but his voice is so
way he talks,
iconic.
yeah.
His teeth, man, the grill that he wears. Michael Rooker is fantastic. Shout out to him in The Walking Dead. But this was where I saw him first. And he was so good in this movie that when I saw him in Walking Dead, even though he's the worst character in that show,
hate him in Walking Dead.
he's so bad. But it's because like Michael Rooker is at his core, he's a crappy guy, but he has a little bit of a charm side to him. Like when he's
You mean
sitting-
Yondu?
Yondu, yeah, sorry.
We're not bashing Michael Rooker,
No.
the actor.
I went like when he's sitting and the guy had the big eyebrows, he's like obolele wobolele, the high end obolele wobolele. Like dude, that scene is hilarious. So yeah, I'm going with Yondu. That's my favorite character. Ethan, you said your favorite scene. It's the Peter reading the letter. Micah, what's your favorite scene?
I really like the opening of this movie. Since we haven't talked about it, I'll say it here. I love how we set up this character as having this tragic backstory, and then we cut to he's jamming out. He's masking his feelings. Like, oh wow, he just went through this super traumatic event. He was just kidnapped by aliens, that we think of, and now he's just hanging out. We're gonna have a deep story with this guy, and we do. Sets up the rest of the Guardians.
The fun movie starts very dark.
Very
actually.
dark. This is one of the darkest cold opens that we get because this teenager's mom dies right in front of him. What is he, 10 years old? 10 years
Yeah.
old about?
Not very old.
Yeah. And that's rough. He's like, reach for my hand, Peter, reach for my hand. And then she dies right in front of him after giving him that present. And then he's screaming. It reminds me of how Peter reacts to Rocket dying in Guardians 3.
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
screaming,
yeah.
the hold me back kind of mindset. And then he's pulled out of the room by his grandpa, and I can see how he would think that his grandpa was mad at him. Looking back from Guardians 3, that you can totally see that. How a 10-year-old would think, oh, he doesn't want me. Nobody wants me. Now that mom's gone, who cares? So he runs out. Rest is history.
Truly is. Yeah.
One of the greatest origin stories of all. He doesn't have
You put
superpowers.
that really well. Like that was good stuff.
Hey, thank
man.
you.
That
He
was
doesn't
good
have
stuff.
any superpowers. His superpowers is his astonishingly good looks and my body that I put on him,
There you go.
and his gadgets.
Indeed.
Loved it.
I would say that my favorite scene is the ending, the
Dance
dance
off, bro.
battle to save the
Me and
universe. Distracting
Just
you,
like
Turtle
Footloose.
Blossom. And then also just the dive to get the stone. As the Guardians, they each come towards him and put their hands on him, and as Gamora reaches her hand out, you get the cold take right to his mom. So much right there, and then Ronan with he's not the greatest villain, but he makes that scene so epic. You're mortal, how? And he's like, you said it yourself. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then
You missed a word in there.
intentionally. So freaking good, man. I'm telling you, that scene it makes the whole movie just wrap up so nicely, and then you have a couple scenes after that end off the movie really nicely. But that in that crux is where he gets over that. He reaches out, grabs his mom's hand. That's why he's able to read that note. So great scene. But now's the time, ladies
hard
and
part.
gentlemen. Now's the hard part, because
Yeah, we got to look at
I
the
think
Hollywood Reporter rating.
Yeah.
the
Yes.
only negative
Bust
we've
that out.
had is that Ronan's bad.
And the rewatchability is a bit less
that one, yes.
because of the exposition that they dump every.
I
40
think it's
minutes.
very rewatchable.
I also think it's very rewatchable, but there are certain things that don't hit as hard
Yeah.
now that you've seen it, a
But
million times.
they do a pretty good job of helping with the reiterization to make it smooth, just make it kind of natural. But overall, there's just some parts that's, I don't know.
Before we dive into score, let's talk about James Gunn essentially created a new world. There's a lot of world building in this.
Yes.
What do you guys think of his world building?
He introduced the Celestials. That's insane.
Yeah. There you
Dude,
go.
the Celestial head of nowhere is like, Celestials are going to be huge in the MCU going forward. I think that they're going to be one of the big bads in phase. What are we on now? 5, 4?
We're in 5.
We're in 5.
We're in 5 now, guys. That's crazy. So Celestials are going to be huge. They were introduced in Eternals as like physical characters.
We see one in Guardians.
We see one in Guardians. Guardians 2 isn't Ego a Celestial?
Yep.
Yeah.
Technically, Peter Quill is too.
Yeah. Half Celestial.
Yep.
Half Terran.
But what the most cosmic we've had so far is Thor.
Yeah.
And that's not that cosmic.
Miss Marvel's cosmic. She says it herself.
Well, yeah, but we haven't made it there
The
yet.
thing that's that really impresses me are just the sets.
Yeah.
The set design. Because in Thor, you have some really cool sets. You have Asgard, but it's really Asgard and then it's Earth. And same with a lot of other Marvel movies.
Yeah.
It just feels very like Earth. But this is, you have to create a whole new world. You have to create that prison set. That whole thing is practical.
Yeah.
It astonishes me just how James Gunn, he had this vision and you have to craft it. I think that set design is one of my favorite parts about movies. Just seeing how they, just where they shoot is just so cool to me, and how someone had to build that. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Imagine being on production. I've thought of that a couple times. Just making the sets for the movies.
You build
built
huge practical sets
Yeah.
for something that's going to be in like 3 minutes of a movie.
Or the prop guys. After,
Yeah.
remember the Phase Zero interview where the guy said after this movie came out, they had a hard time finding replacements for the Walkman because people were buying them.
Right.
That's an authentic Walkman. That's the first one that came out.
All right, Micah.
Yeah.
I want to hear what the internet thinks before we
All right.
give our scores.
So, Guardians of the Galaxy. If you guys don't know, we like to see what the internet thinks. So I pull from Rotten Tomatoes, I pull from Metacritic, I pull from IMDb, Letterboxd. So our Rotten Tomatoes critic gives it a 92, audience is 92, Metacritic is a 76, Metacritic users an 8.2, IMDb is an 8.0, and Letterboxd out of 5 is a 3.8. 3.8.
Pretty high.
That's pretty good.
That's great.
3.8. That's not that high for Letterboxd. Let me remind you guys, that would put it in like 12th, 14th place for Letterboxd. The 4 range is really like top tier movies for Letterboxd. They're strict over there. But Guardians of the Galaxy on IMDb is, what is it? Number 8. It's 8th place on IMDb. But our overall internet ranking gives it a 6th place. So if that's 6th place,
every Marvel film that
across
we've reviewed so
every
far.
Marvel film, no, total, like all of the Marvel
All
films
time.
ever of all time, it is the 6th highest rated Marvel movie of all time.
Whoa.
Yeah,
People love this movie. I mean,
and that's even with Guardians 3 included. I'm pretty
we
sure I
love
just
it.
included it in the
But
list.
there are so many stories of just the characters that the Guardians are. I've seen them online. People I follow on social media have said this, where like legit this movie and these characters stop them from committing suicide. Like that's how crazy it is. How big of an impact this movie has had.
So for our MCU movies, we have No Way Home, Endgame, Iron Man, Guardians
Across the internet. Yeah.
across the internet. Yeah,
Jeez.
but the list that we really want to care about,
Oh yeah.
if you guys don't know, Hollywood Reporter
Hollywood Reporter.
did a list that is the top tier.
Iconic list.
Iconic. Where do you guys think Hollywood Reporter's iconic list places
Top
Guardians
20.
of the Galaxy?
Top 20.
You know what?
You
I
want to
think
narrow it down? You want to go bolder?
they screw up a lot, but like you just said, people love this movie.
Yeah.
I say this is a top 10er.
Top 10?
It's got to be in their top 10. Hopefully.
Is it above or below First Avenger, Captain America? According to Hollywood Reporter.
Well, I know what I would say, but according to Hollywood Reporter,
Yeah.
I would say it's above.
Above. Do you think Big Hero 6 is above or below? All right. Guardians of the Galaxy is 19.
Oh.
Just
wow.
underneath
Whoa.
Captain America, First Avenger. Just above Deadpool 2 and Deadpool 1. Just below Big Hero 6, which is our next movie. Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy. But
None of that matters.
None of that matters.
None of that matters
cares?
now. Who cares?
Because we have our scores.
We have our ranking.
We have our heading.
So, Micah, I'm shooting it to you first, and you already put this on Letterboxd.
Ooh.
Follow us
I
on
want to
Letterboxd.
get because you do decimals.
Yes.
So, where exactly are you putting this? What score are you giving Guardians?
Guardians of the Galaxy is one of my favorite franchises.
Good. Yep.
Okay. But the first movie has some flaws. And those flaws make this movie a bit more bland than its better sequels. With some repetitive character exposition, with some moments of lacking, such as the villains. I think there are things, all of these things are fixed in the sequel, from what I can remember. That's why I give this an 8.9.
Oh,
out of 10.
8.9.
Wow.
Not quite in that upper echelon.
Not in the 9 yet.
Not in the
Wow.
9,
Wow.
but I'd say this is just about as good as. So I gave Iron Man 3 an 8.9. I gave the Avengers an 8.8. I think the needle drops really helped this movie.
Okay.
Micah doesn't like to go too high up on too many movies.
No.
So
Once they
That's
hit,
fair, though. I
once they
respect
hit that upper 9s, then I'm like, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Let's leave some room.
8.9.
But yeah, I'm going 8.9.
All right, Ethan.
okay, to me this is I'm not saying it's the best movie we've seen so far, but
You
this
said
is
that last week.
Yes. I did say that last week. This is my personal favorite of the movies we've seen so far, just from a character standpoint.
Ever. On this rewatch.
On the rewatch right now.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay.
This is
That's big.
my favorite one. I don't think it's the best one we've seen. I think the nostalgia factor of the first Avengers really like pushes it up for me.
He just
And
wants to bring his average score back
I'm bringing my
up.
average back up. Yeah, I'm going a little too low, but I think the character work is great. The world building is great. The CGI and effects are great. James Gunn's vision is great. Performances are great.
Yep.
So much of this movie I just love. And to me, it's infinitely rewatchable. I rewatched it twice this month and it's fluid. It feels so right. Specifically the voice acting by Bradley Cooper is just, I don't know. I love the way he plays
Yep.
Rocket. But yeah, Ronan's terrible. Ronan doesn't really add a lot to the movie, but we do get the introduction of Thanos. To me, this is almost a 10. I want to say it's a 10, but I've given out 2 10s already, right? I have.
You have.
So I can't
that's
I
no,
can't get too
wait.
excessive with my 10s.
You've
Yeah,
got
let's
the
do it.
Avengers and Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to put this
I mean,
10.
if you give them a
but
10,
I know. What are you saying about me? Huh?
I think you're an easy 10.
I think your 8.9 is too
Ooh,
low.
You're a 10.
I think I don't know. Where did you put? Let's look at your Ghost Rider score, Micah.
All right.
What you give Ghost Rider? No, to me, it's not as hard to hit that 10 as it is for you
That's
guys.
fair.
So
Okay.
I'm going 9.8. No, go 9 points. Put me down 9.6.
9.6.
9.6.
Okay.
I love this movie a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, the internet ranks this. Rotten Tomatoes, they've got this, 0.4 lower than you do.
Yeah, like
They love this movie.
Ronan is bad, but the rest of the characters, the 5, like comparing the 5 characters in this movie to the 6 in the Avengers, just from a character standpoint, how they introduced all these characters in this one movie is really impressive work.
Oh, another quick thing. Gamora quickly falls in love with Quill. That's about all I have to say.
Who said she's in love?
I disagree with that.
Who said she's in love?
Okay.
I disagree.
I think she kind of falls fast.
They're not. Who
And
says?
then, goes for the next.
Who says they're in love?
Well, you know those eyes. She does that thing. They play the song.
Well, yeah, I think the
does the thing,
start
right?
of their relationship, but even in Guardians too, they're not.
Yeah.
Quill is upset by that fact that it's not like this is going nowhere. This is a boring television series. No one wants to watch this kind of romance. So I think that while she is starting to fall for him, minor seeds are starting to be planted. I don't think she is in love with him. I agree with you, Ethan. So so this is gonna maybe be controversial.
3.4.
Not because of where I place this but because of what is around this movie in my personal scores. I really like this movie. I really do. And I think that it, besides Ronan and a few jokes that don't land as much anymore, there's not too many flaws with this movie. Like I like how you say it's fluid. I really like that because you go back and rewatch this movie and it's a fun watch. You never have a bad time watching this movie. Mm-hmm. And the character drama is there. It definitely is. We've highlighted many scenes. A scene we didn't even highlight, Yondu and Quill. You've been throwing that in my face for years, man. Normal people don't even think about trying to eat people. That's another great scene. But for me, personally, when it comes to Marvel movies and heart, there's certainly a lot in here. It's just that I prefer a little bit more when it comes to my Marvel television than this. There's nothing against this movie. It's just, it's almost in a way to where I see Andor. It's great, but it's not the Marvel that I will put so high, you know, because I like it, but it's just not the top.
For reference, if you hear that comparison, go, what? Andor's fantastic. Ben likes Andor, doesn't love Andor.
Right.
It's not his cup of tea. And so you're saying Guardians aren't your main dish when you come to the MCU.
When I come to the MCU, I'm here for Tony Stark. I'm here for Steve Rogers. I think their stories are more interesting because of where they sit in the MCU. Because Guardians does feel not as connected. And that's not a slight to those movies. In fact, I feel almost as more of it's a strength. But that hurts the ranking for me sometimes. I'm not giving it a bad score. I'm giving it an 8. But I feel like some people would be upset with it being at 8 because 8's not a bad score, but maybe it should be a 9. I'm not saying it's a 9. I'm saying this movie's great. It's just not where I would put 9s. Like a 9 is X-Men Days of Future Past. Not as good as X-Men Days of Future Past, in my opinion. Not as good as Captain America, the First Avenger, in my opinion. Not as good as The Avengers. Some people would disagree with me, but I put this at an 8.
I respect it, Ben.
I respect an 8. That's fine.
What does the 8 do for our overall ranking, Micah?
Ethan, with your score of 9.6, Ben with your score of an 8, and me with my score of an 8.9, that gives us an 8.83.
An 8.8?
An 8.83. Our 35th movie in the Marvel watch through. Do you want me to start from the top?
Dude, that's just about halfway, right?
Halfway to peak.
Is that the 35th or 34th? I know you've misread that
35th
chart before.
35th. I did the thing and now it's 35th. Yep, 35th.
Okay.
Wow.
Halfway to peak.
Wow.
Because you know what's in 35 projects?
Morbius.
70th project. Number 1, we have Winter Soldier at 9.8. Number 2, we have The Avengers at 9.4. Number 3, X-Men Days of Future Past at 9.1. Spider-Man 2 for 4th place at an 8.9. And Iron Man was in 5th place at an 8.8. Guardians of the Galaxy has an 8.83.
Wow.
Knocking Iron Man out of the top 5. Our new
I'm okay with that.
5th place winner, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I can sit here and I can be mad about the scores that different people give it, but like where it falls in that average, I think it's pretty good.
There it is.
I like that.
That's good.
That's the beauty of the average, the beauty of having 3 guys do this, because at the end, it's going to be, and I love that being in the top 5, because Iron Man's great. I don't know if I'd say it's as good as the first Guardians, though. They're both right there. But maybe Guardians edges it out just a little bit more, maybe? Just a little bit? They're both great, though. But I like it. So that's our top 5. Guardians reaches the top 5 spot in that 5th place spot, which is fantastic. Is next week's movie going to beat it?
Ooh.
Michael, what's next week?
Big Hero 6, our first animated movie. We have, 4 animated movies that we can see? So we have Big Hero 6, we have Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all we got.
Far.
Theatrically released.
Theatrical release, yeah. We're not doing
which
any
is what
TV
we're
movies.
doing. Yeah.
We may or may not do the MCU series, and if that goes into it, What If is also animated.
Right.
So
Maybe.
there's that. But as of right now, we're just doing those movies. And as of this recording right now, We got Across the Spider-Verse coming up pretty dang soon. So we got to get our tickets for that, actually. Probably not. The theater we go to. Yeah, right.
They don't.
But I am very, very excited for that
it'll be a
movie.
good one. Yeah.
But there you go, folks. Guardians is an 8.83 for the first Guardians movie.
Yep.
Very interesting. And next week's going to be interesting because this is very detached. This is like a very different kind of movie than what we're used to reviewing.
When we first threw this list together, this movie was not on our marathon docket.
But if we didn't have this one, then we couldn't do Into the Spider-Verse movies, and that's no fun. It's all on the same list.
There's Sony.
Yeah,
Sony.
no,
Yeah.
that they would have fit. This one is just the only tie this has is that it's Marvel,
It's an
got Stan
official
Lee.
Marvel comic.
but it does have
Stan Lee.
It's
Stan Lee.
like, yeah, we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah,
But
we will.
It does have Stan Lee, and it was released in theaters, and that's the criteria. If the movie was released in theaters,
And it's a Marvel movie.
exclusively
And it's a wild-
Marvel published comics. Because there are things like Malibu Comics that
Right.
did Men in Black.
right, has to be Marvel.
Yeah.
So this movie fits that, and we're going to be talking about Big Hero 6. I haven't seen this since this came out. I remember almost nothing about this movie. So
It's on Disney Plus. I also have the Blu-ray.
we'll be watching that next week. We thank you guys for watching and tuning in this long. We
Follow us on
appreciate it, guys.
Letterboxd. I'm having a lot of fun on Letterboxd, man. I
What's
don't know
your at? What can they follow you at, Micah?
My at is what is my at? MDHETT02.
You can't just vaguely say, well, follow me on Letterboxd.
Well, look up my name. I'm like the only mic on there, so I don't know.
I
doubt
highly
that.
doubt that.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, yeah, Letterboxd is kind of fun.
Oh, I am the
Although
only
they-
Micah hat on Letterboxd.
They'd be spoiled, man.
They
They'd
would be spoiled
of your
Uh,
scores.
If you want a sneak peek as to what we're reviewing, I do a bit of a detailed review for our.
Yeah.
I started doing some good paragraphs.
He didn't write just a paragraph
I
for
wrote a book.
Guardians. He wrote a book.
I just want my immediate
Kind of like
thoughts
the
written
book
out.
we had for the Mark Webb or Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, right. So stay tuned for that, folks. Otherwise, this is Ben Rayside.
This is Ethan Wetzel.
This is Micah Hat.
Signing off. We all hope you have an absolutely fantastic day.
I have 13 followers on Letterboxd now.